Okay. Can we all sit a little bit closer? We'll turn the mics off, and I mean we'll still
We'll
walk through
still
the
have the
slides.
slides, but
Yeah, you'll still get all the content. It's just like you can ask questions, get a little more closer. Okay,
yeah.
let's do that. Um, can we turn
Well,
the?
before that, I think we are obligated just to put the forward-looking
Let's do
statement
that part.
slide
Yeah.
up. The lawyers made me do it. So
Yeah.
yeah, anything that we're presenting here, you know how it goes. So yeah,
Yeah.
cool,
Actually, is the mic helpful? Should we just leave the mics on?
cool.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay. Okay. Let's do it.
all right.
Cool. Yeah. So my name's Eason. I'm the product manager for dashboards at the ABI team. Patrick is our staff engineer who's worked a lot in the past year on our scheduling and kind of distribution features. So the intent of the talk today is to go through kind of the latest on what we're doing in terms of like sharing dashboards and making sure it's performant. And just getting a feel, actually, now that we're in a closer group, like this is what you were looking for in terms of getting dashboards out to your organizations, and if there were other things you're curious about, small group, we can talk about that too. So I guess real quick, and actually, if you mind clicking for me.
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
So have you guys all used AIBI out of curiosity? No, some of us haven't.
If you
Okay,
haven't,
so real, I think worth covering. So real quick, AIBI is two product lines. Sorry, one product line with two products, Genie and dashboards. Today we're talking about the distribution of dashboards specifically. And I think it's a little, if we go to the next slide, a little helpful to kind of articulate why we invested in AIBI in the first place. So Databricks has third-party tools that we work with, like your Tableau's, Power BI's, Lookers of the world. But we got a lot of asks for like a native BI solution about 2, 3 years ago. And the ask were motivated kind of by three things. One was, people wanted to just leverage the governance they already set up in Databricks. So procuring another tool is painful. Making sure they get the licenses is a little bit more expensive that way, right? It's just easier if you have one less tool to manage. But also, Databricks scaled data. So what we mean that as like tables only get bigger. And when you have to get it to another tool, you usually meant you have to do some kind of extract. You have to persist data in two different places. Kind of expensive, things fall out of date, hard to manage. Or you have to go direct query, which isn't always cheap and it isn't always fast. But people are like, hey, like my notebooks and SQL editors perform great, and I get visualizations. Can I just do my BI in Databricks, right? So that's another reason. And then the third one is, I think Databricks right now is in a really unique position to give you a smarter AI than most vendors. And the reason for that is LLMs need a lot of context. And that context right now lives in pipelines, notebooks, dashboards, SQL queries, right? And other tools don't have access to your entire data estate, but the Databricks workspace has a lot of context in there. So when you build a Genie space, you can pull in all these assets as context really easily, and it's all governed by UC, just like the first point there. So all those things together made AIBI kind of like a good fit for kind of BI in the modern age. So we built this tool from scratch. And one thing I just wanted to highlight is on stage this morning is like Rivian is now one of our key partners in AIBI, right? Where they're getting insights out of the Databricks workspace into technical users, non-technical users, and it's really becoming a fully fledged solution that like you can build an entire kind of BI solution on. So the one thing I wanted to say on the kind of where we are in our journey is when we started at GA last year, we kind of said, we'd love for you guys to try AIBI. We think it's like a really clean, efficient solution. But we heard feedback that was like, I would love to, but you don't have maps, or I would love to, but you don't have drill down, or you don't have multi-page. My data analysts expect, these 17 features that I can't find in your docs, and that's because they didn't exist. So we're building a lot of features that we call conventional BI into Databricks right now. So there's a really long list here, and we'd love to kind of keep getting feedback from you guys in terms of, what is the next thing you'd like to see out of dashboards to enable kind of the next use case. So that's the general look at dashboards, but this is like a distribution meeting. So we were talking about how do we distribute these insights to your entire organization. And there's like three categories for this. Thank you for clicking. And what we heard is that a distribution kind of breaks down in three ways. The first one is scheduled reporting. So this is the kind that just shows up in people's inboxes, right? Monday morning sales reports, end of month progress reports, right? People just get these in their inbox. They don't have to worry about what tool it came from. You're just like, you look like a hero if you get this into all these teams. The other one is embedding. So taking dashboards out of the workspace, putting it into like a custom BI portal. You can now do that in Databricks as well. But then also a direct access, right? So there's like native interactivity that might be useful. People might want ad hoc insights whenever they kind of get a query from somebody else on Slack. So making sure people can be easily provisioned into Databricks and log in, look at the data they're supposed to, but like not run a super expensive query in SQL editor, not suddenly start messing around notebooks when they're not supposed to, right? So a better way to give direct access.
Yeah.
So
Actually, Eason, let's
yeah,
pause there. So, like, I think there's a couple folks who trolled in a bit late. But yeah, so this is a rerun of a session we did on Tuesday. We're happy to do the same presentation again if you want the whole formal. But we're also offering like an opportunity if you want to just stop us for questions in the meantime. Like do the kind of like the informal. Like it's
yeah,
a small group, right? So like we're here for like to help answer any questions, and hopefully this is a little
yeah,
it's more interesting than just like doing the same presentation you can get on a lot, right? So.
yeah.
So yeah, so feel free to like raise your hand, stop us for any time, ask us questions about, what we're presenting or anything about AIBI in general. So,
Yeah.
we're more than happy to answer for you guys. So
Yeah, I mean, the plan right now is to go through the scheduled reporting in terms of some slides. We got a demo of how those look, and then go through embedding and a demo of that as well. So just so you guys know what's coming.
yeah,
Any questions so far? Any thoughts?
yeah.
Yeah,
I can repeat the question. So the question is around like dashboards with service principles, right? Executing with service principles. So
yeah. So today you can already publish a dashboard as an SP with the API. What's not with the API is what's not available yet is doing it in the UI, and that's coming in about a quarter or two. Okay, cool. So schedules. I won't belabor the point if we've already done this, but how many of us have scheduled like an ABI dashboard out of curiosity? Okay, so actually not that many. So
a couple people.
a couple people, yeah. So work helpful to maybe to walk through what it is then. So really simply, when you publish a dashboard today, you can schedule it. What that means is you can say on these time intervals, I want this dashboard to run, and I want those results to be emailed out to, say, a group of users, an email mailing list, or individual users, right? It's like I think the immediate insight thing we all kind of get. What's more like kind of what we think about less is sometimes the performance side. So if you have all those workloads you have to run, you have to run these schedules like a couple times a week. You can do that at like 5 in the morning, right? And you can use the same warehouse. So by the time people show up to work at 9 and they start using their dashboards ad hoc, like you can move a lot of the scheduled workloads up. So there's a big performance impact actually to doing scheduled reporting. And this was available at GA. But there were a couple limitations last year when we GA'd this. The first one was it always used the publisher's credentials. So everybody got the same copy of the dashboard. And the other one was it always ran with default filter values. So if you had like a time range picker, a region picker, a team picker, it kind of just ran on like whatever defaults you had. So I would get on customer calls and people would say, it's really annoying because I want to send this to 4 different sales teams. So I'm like making the same dashboard 4 times with different default values just so it can go to different people. So we are working to give you kind of flexibility in that.
Yeah, well, actually, let's go to this one
Let's
first.
go to that one first.
This
So
one,
so
yeah.
parameterized schedules does that to you now. Gives you that capability. So now when you create a new schedule, you get like 9 a.m. right, 9 a.m. sales report. You can either use default values or you can just inherit the current state of the dashboard. So you can like tune all those like knobs and then save the schedule, and it will run with those values coded in. And then you can create another schedule called like monthly sales report, right, with like all regions, and that can go to your executives. So that's one of the things we did. But the other part that I mentioned about everybody getting the same data access is we've now also enabled recipient-driven permissions. So now when you publish a dashboard, when everybody views it using their own permissions, that also applies to the schedules. This wasn't possible until about a month ago when we released this. So now you can have every single viewer kind of enforce their own UC permissions as part of that schedule execution. So people only see data they're supposed to see.
Yeah, and just one more thing, the schedules and workflows.
Yeah. So this one is kind of you can think of this as expanding the possibilities for how like what you can use to trigger a dashboard schedule. So obviously you've got the time-based, like every Monday at 9 a.m. kind of example. But now you can also trigger it as part of a workflow. So if you use workflows today to update tables, for example, or you can use it for alerting, you can run a query, and if the results are greater than a certain threshold, you do some kind of business logic, right? Now you can also execute dashboards as part of that workflow. So it's actually super flexible because there are so many task types and control flows you can set up in workflows. You can imagine like as soon as a table is updated, send a version of that dashboard to the latest data, right? When you can say like run this query, like basically do some alerting, kind of like built into a job, and then if it passes a certain threshold, burst that dashboard out to a certain user. So you can do all of those things now in subscriptions, and We did prepare a demo, so Patrick, you want to go through that?
Yeah, let's do the demo. So yeah, in this case, since it is a small group, I'll try to kind of like, go a bit fast, but like feel free to stop me at any time. Like, if you see something you're interesting that you want me to expand the details on, like I'm more than happy to click and go off trail, so to say, right?
Yeah.
And show you some other stuff if you want. So, sorry, let's go. Okay, so the demo is normally supposed to go. Actually, I gotta, oops, that's not what I was supposed to press. Let's reset this. So this is a dashboard that we have set up for an example use case. You might recognize it actually from the keynote. It's the same dashboard. If you've never used AIBI dashboards, take a look. It looks pretty nice, right? It's like very modern, like competitive with all the other BI tools in the market, I think, in my opinion. And the focus on today is going to be on scheduling, right? So if you've never built a schedule today, you can go to the schedules tab, and then here, if you don't have any schedules, it'll ask you to add a schedule, right? So you have all these tools that you're available. You can say, okay, what time of day you want the schedule to run. You can also select a specific warehouse to run it on, as well as what I'm going to show off, which is the filter selections. So yeah, if you're not aware, in AIBI, you can kind of like, add these filters, really useful, kind of like, filter down the data that's being presented in your dashboard. But what we're recently adding here is essentially this capability to bind the filter selections to the schedule, right? So schedule, like as on its own, like what we had last year, is kind of intuitive. It's just you run the dashboard at some time of day and you send the email out of the PDF of that dashboard, right? So now with the filter selections, you can bind the filters that I currently have selected such that, you can see here that, hey, this schedule is going to run. When it's going to run, it's going to use the the industry equals education filter and the sales stage equals discovery filter, right? So I think I need to zoom out a bit to save this. Yep. So if I create this, now you see the schedule. I can also inspect the filters from here. And just to give you an example of what it might show up like, here's an example I have from my inbox, right? So you can see that, just give you a comparison. Here's what it looks like in the UI. These two bars that are looking at that. You get the same thing in your email, right? So as Eason mentioned, it's a really great way to kind of like customize the schedule execution. I think that a lot of the themes that we're going to talk about today is basically taking the same dashboard and just keeping it as one dashboard, right? One dashboard that has a lot of use cases with all the power of the filtering and et cetera logic inside. So instead of like creating a separate dashboard for the education industry and a separate one for the marketing industry and et cetera, you just have one that just works for everything. It's the same template, so to say, and it can be multiplexed in many different use cases, right?
Yeah, I think it might be weird for the dashboard team to be up here saying you should build fewer dashboards. That's truly the goal we're trying to get you guys to is,
Yeah.
we don't want, one new dashboard for every new use case. With Genie, with scheduling, like we just want one dashboard to be super flexible. So you just have fewer assets to manage and fewer things people have to know where to go to find.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, the second thing I'll show off is this kind of recipient-driven permissions. So actually, how many of you have used like UC before? Like set up, rules and stuff like that. Maybe row level security, column masking, all those cool features, right? So one of the amazing things about using dashboards on top of Databricks is that it respects all those rules. Naturally, it should, right? It's using the same engine, and then now what we've added is essentially the scheduling capability to further respect that all the way to the scheduling layer, right? So I have this dashboard set up. You'll notice that it respects whoever is viewing the dashboard and it says their name at the top left. So it says my email there. It also is only accessing data that I have access to. So I only have access to the North and West regions because those are the regions I control as a sales executive. So it's only going to display data for that. I currently have a schedule set up such that it emails both me and Eason. So it's basically running from both me and Eason. And then, in my inbox, what I see is the exact same thing I just showed in the UI, right? Okay, it's like my name and then my regions, right? But if you take a look at what Eason would have gotten in his email in this PDF, it's getting his information, right? Like now the data in the same dashboard spec is filtered down to only the rows that he has access to, and those rows correspond to the east and south regions, right? And also his name is in the top left, right? So you're seeing here that basically you have one schedule, one dashboard. It's respecting all the row level security rules that you added into Unity Catalog. If you had column masking rules, those are respected. All the cool stuff they also showed up on the keynote today about like attribute-based access control and tagging and etc. All of those are respected as well because at Databricks we have one engine that essentially works across the board. So all the rules are always going to be respected. And yeah, this is just the one way that we're kind of extending that kind of like those data governance rules all the way to your like dashboard scheduling layer. So it just intuitively works across the board. So
And one nice thing about the way we do scheduling here is because it was run as Patrick's credentials and also run as mine, when that email gets to your inbox and then you choose to open the actual dashboard back in Databricks, you can click on the icon and it just opens it live. We just pull the cache results. So like we don't do the work again when you open that dashboard. We cache it for every single person it's bursted to.
yeah.
So there's a performance benefit there as well.
Yeah, I think haven't run it today, so like that's why it's like okay, it's not too bad. But yeah, you'll see that like oh the link shows up, it goes directly.
Got a question? Yeah.
Yeah. So the question for the recording is can we include CSV or raw dump of the data in the email? And it's something that we've looked at. It's a very common feature request. Not currently, but we're looking at adding it in the next few quarters. So.
Actually, just I wanted to ask a follow up. Is anybody else in the room interested in sending CSVs to in the email? Okay. We'd love for you guys to help us settle not a debate, but a product direction that we're considering, which is basically like what is actually in that CSV. So there's two. Do you want pulling up a dashboard?
Yeah.
There's two options. One is this dashboard has a couple of data sets, and each of those data sets returns the data back to the SQL. We could include all of those, right? The other version is you could actually get.
Let me show you this one because this one's more visible.
Yeah. So there's this version of the data, right, which is actually in the back of the dashboard, and then there's what's actually embedded into each individual chart. So like what is the values of that table? What is the values of this? So it might be a spread, but I love to get the feel for like who wants the data set version?
It's the raw data. Okay.
Raw data.
Yeah, so the question for the recording is, if let's say we're scheduling the dashboard, it's trying to run the data to generate the report. Let's say one or more of the data set queries doesn't run correctly, or has an error or something like that. Is there any monitoring built in, or does the analyst have to set up monitoring on their own, or what would we say for that, right?
Yeah. One thing I'll say is you can already do some of that in jobs. So if you have a workflow that triggers and the workflow fails, you can already kind of like cut it off and not send that, right? But today, when a schedule runs, it doesn't. So when a dashboard actually runs that schedule, so by the time it gets to the dashboard job executing, we don't have any alerting yet to tell you like, hey, maybe this dashboard query didn't work out today. That's a really good piece of feedback. I think we're looking at author alerting at the moment, so we'll go to the owner of the dashboard, for example, but not something that's possible today.
Yeah. So yeah, to expand on that, not available in the so-called native scheduling you see from the button up here. But yeah, like we're looking at that. I think personally, I think it's a very useful addition to say, hey, like we couldn't run your schedule for whatever reason, and just get a notification of that. Yeah. That being said, what Eason was talking about in the workflows is about what I was about to demo next. Actually, let me delete this for now. So yeah, like how many of you have used Databricks workflows before? Okay, a couple. If you haven't, you might know it's kind of like our general purpose orchestration tool for most people used for like ETL or ingest, something to that effect. So yeah, like what we're adding here is the capability to kind of add a dashboard task onto your workflow. So let me just fill in some of the details here, and then send it. Get this dashboard going. So yeah, you can set it to some certain subscribers, so it'll like generate a PDF and send that out as well. And yeah, to Eason's point earlier, essentially, inside the workflow is extremely powerful, right? So like the workflow level, there are tools to say such like notifications for like, hey, this entire workflow, this entire job failed, right? So if you're willing to kind of so to say get in the weeds in that respect, and are willing to kind of like manage your schedules in this more complex way, you can add all of the tools that like the workflows team is building, right? Like you can say, hey, I have the job failed. I'm going to send it to myself, right? So that is available right now. So to a certain extent, it's like a matter of like us like front porting those features into like our native scheduling as well. So you can kind of think about like that's the gap that's happening right now.
Yeah,
so.
but workflows, honestly, it opens up so much flexibility for like kind of you can decide when should a dashboard be sent and to who. You can do all of that logic within a workflow.
Yeah, like this is tied to an ingest pipeline. So like basically it's like, hey, I got new data, I'm gonna run the dashboard again. I'm going a bit off script here, but you can do some really cool stuff with workflows as well. They added this new a file arrival trigger, right? So that's even like more smart. That's like not even just the cron running the schedule. It's saying like, hey, the schedule is only going to run when there's new data, and my dashboard is only going to run when the job is running. So our dashboard only runs when there's new data, right? That's really cool. So
Yep.
there's a lot of really cool, powerful stuff that I can answer questions on the workflows. Not generally the topic of this presentation, but more than happy to answer if anybody has any. Yeah. Okay. So you're getting a little too ahead. That's what the second half of
That is
the
the second
presentation is
half.
about. So
Yeah.
we'll get to there in just a second.
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't we go back to the presentation and we
Sure.
can
Let's
kind of
do that.
speed through some of the rest of the slides. But
Yeah. Yeah. So yes, you can use it in a web application. Actually, we can just go to the slide of the two.
okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
awesome. So last year at GA, we launched the initial version of embedding, and that had one, some would consider it a limitation, some would consider it a benefit, which is those who can access that dashboard had to be a Databricks user. So what that meant was, hey, like I can just provision my users into Databricks, set up their data access in UC, and I can put this into I can put this on Twitter, for example, and still only my own users who are provisioned properly can access that dashboard, right? So super secure. And once you had everything set up, it was super easy. Um, but what we heard is that you guys also wanted to take dashboards to your external facing applications. So like partners, customers who don't exist in your IDP should not have access to your internal data. But you do want to put a dashboard in front of them because it's helpful for them to see how much of your product they're using, for example, or some like performance metrics that you have that you can serve to them. So right now, what's in public preview, private preview, is what we're calling embedding with app delegated auth. So this is a bit more of like a more complex, requires some front-end engineering way of setting up dashboards. But what it gives you is first of all, the benefit of your end users could be anybody. So you authenticate the application of Databricks rather than authenticating the user. And then it's up to you as the application owner on who gets access to that page, right? So you can start controlling who sees what dashboard on your own as a front-end engineer. And then you can still pass parameters to say like vendor A should only see vendor A's data, vendor B should only see vendor B's data. And you can pass parameters as part of the dashboard request, and you can substitute those values into the where clause of the SQL. So you can do all that management and customization yourself. And the last thing I'll mention, and I know Patrick's going to show this in a second, is we also added out of the box auditing. So there's a custom field that you can pass that we don't have access to, but you guys do, where you can say like, hey, like literally here's an email address or here's a UUID. And that gets put into the dashboard audit logs as like get dashboard events. So you can look at like which vendor is looking at your dashboards, which user in that vendor is looking at your dashboards, and you can have all that tracing end to end as well. But Patrick, yeah, please, maybe more helpful to just show what it
Cool.
looks
Yeah,
like.
let's show it off. So
Yeah.
the first version of so again, same dashboard as before. I didn't reset this, but you can imagine like this is the first version that we were presented last year is kind of this iframe based embedding. So it's kind of like suitable for like wiki pages or something that like only your employees have access to, because it does rely on your employees login to Databricks to kind of like access and render this, right? So this is pretty straightforward. Just like hey, wiki page, Confluence, SharePoint, whatever, and it's just embedded in there. Looks really nice. You can do all the same cool stuff that you can do in the UI, which is really cool.
Same caching, same
Yep.
access controls,
Yep.
everything you get in product.
Yeah, it's really just an embedded version. What we want to show off today is kind of this app delegated auth. So kind of to review what Eason just mentioned for a second, a really common use case that we've heard a lot of you wanted to kind of support is I have my own like web application that I'm like hosting myself, right? Maybe I'm doing this as a vendor portal for like my customer, like you're a B2B customer company and you're like serving your own customers or something to that effect. And I want to be able to serve like AIBI dashboards via this mechanism, right? Where like, hey, these users do not have any access to my Databricks because that would be kind of bad. But they, I have set up the authentication on my own for them to access this web application, right? So this is what I'm kind of trying to show here in this vendor portal, here we'll log in for a second, and then I'll just log in right here. And you'll see that like, hey, I'm not imagine I'm not logged into Databricks at all. I still get a rendered version of the dashboard, right? And it's once it loads, it'll show like, hey, this for the specific vendor that I logged in as. I'll show you how to do this in a second as well. The data is reflective of like kind of this parameter that I've passed in, right? And then I can just quickly log out. I'm gonna log in as somebody else. I'm gonna set the password as well. Um, and then you'll see when this renders, hey, it's going to be the other customer's name, and that it's going to be that data reflective, right? So actually, since we're kind of doing a more like ad hoc, low key like demonstration, I'll show you a bit more of the internals. So here's how generally how it works, right? So the dashboard that I built is reflective here, and there's this like specific value, like AIBI external value, that is passed in and passed through, and this is a thing that Eason was also mentioning earlier, which was like the thing that gets passed down to your audit logs, right? So when people view the embedded dashboard in this form, you're going to you're going to see like, oh, Primerica or Vandalay or whoever else logged in and accessed my dashboard, on my Databricks audit logs. Yeah, question? So this is all completely dependent on how you want to set it up the app. So like what I was going to actually show off was I think I can actually give you the code roughly. I can remember where I put it. Um, so this is just something I put together really quickly, like over basically a weekend. Um, you know, to be
You don't
honest,
want to zoom in a lot.
okay, zoom in a lot, yeah. To be honest,
Nice.
ChatGPT did most of the heavy lifting here. So, but you can see it's really just a Flask app. So all that stuff is like HTML. I'm not the best front end engineer, so I'm kind of like definitely leaning on ChatGPT to help me out here. But it's really just like two like Flask, like handlers, right? Essentially, one of which is not even related. It's just rendering the root page. And then here, what we're doing is essentially, we're doing this OAuth handshake, right? So when you have an app, you give it a service principal. You say this service principal is going to be used for an embedding. And then you give it the service principal secret into your app, and then you do this OAuth handshake that basically says like, hey, when I'm like accessing this, the authentication should be this is for an embedded dashboard for AIBI. Actually, let me highlight that right here. This is like you setting the scope of your AI like your OAuth handshake. It's saying it's specifically for AIBI. It's external data. And then all of these templated fields are like kind of the stuff that you pass in. Other than dashboard ID obviously refers to which dashboard you want to access. But external viewer ID and external data are kind of those fields that Eason just mentioned that said like you can pass in as customization to say go to the audit logs as well as go to the that query to kind of like add filtering rules, right?
Yeah.
So when you're asking about user emails, like that's not really up to you, right? So you can just add like a really common use case would be to add the emails. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, that's a bit of a different question. Um,
uh,
hopefully everybody appreciated that view, but like yeah,
well,
yeah,
when you email the report, does it get triggered? Was that
does it get tracked?
does it get tracked? Um, we don't audit log somebody opening the email, but we audit log when the report was sent.
Yeah, we don't do the magic pixel thing. I know a lot of our customers are not really the biggest fan of us adding magic pixels to track when you open emails.
Yeah.
But when you click the link to say like, like actually I'll show you this in a second. If I got this email, if I click the link here, then it'll say like, hey, this person viewed the dashboard.
So yeah, there's a couple types. Like viewing the dashboard gets recorded in audit logging. Also, sending the report itself gets recorded. Um, Adding somebody to the subscription gets recorded. So there's visibility every step of the way. Like create a schedule that's recorded. Like I add Patrick as to a subscriber, like that gets recorded too.
And sending the email out also
Yeah,
gets recorded.
exactly.
But
Yeah.
we can't track when they open it,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Okay, so to repeat the question for the recording, can we configure a way so that each individual viewer to a dashboard can select which warehouse that they use for the dashboard? And the answer to that is no for now. Obviously open to feature requests, but I think you might be interested. So I actually happen to be the one who did the session on enterprise cost management for warehousing. That was on Tuesday. And we are adding a lot more features on like the reporting side to kind of like attribute the execution data and like the cost per query essentially, right? So maybe we won't be able to say like have like different warehouses, but we are getting really close to a world where you can say, hey, these individual queries have certain attributes. They will run against a certain tool or dashboard or query or notebook or something like that. Adding tags to those queries based on some rules. Maybe it's from a specific dashboard and it gets some tags filled through. Whoever ran that query is going to be there as well. And we're going to build like a cost per query model. So like, obviously we build warehouses on cluster uptime, right? But we can like just like distinguish that on the query level because your costs are driven by people running queries, right? So we're building a cost per query model for you, so that you can kind of do more of that fine grained analysis. So it's not exactly what you're asking for, but it kind of gets you. There's a bit of a roundabout way, right? So
Yeah, point taken,
yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Sorry, you had a question as well, right? Yeah, so the question is when you're are passing, like when you're doing the embed and you're doing the pass through the parameters that we showed earlier, are the parameters reported on the you said the audit log? Yeah, the audit logs, and I believe they. I'd have to
I,
get back to you on
I,
that. So,
yeah,
so yeah, for the app delegated authentication, it's currently in private preview for a good reason. We're working through some of the details on here, but
yeah.
I'm certain that something's gonna come up in
Well,
policy before we go to
right,
public preview.
right. So you're executing normal queries, so it would be in query history. So there should be a way to join
Yeah.
the execution.
In this
Right.
case, yes, the query string would include the parameters. Either it's going to be included as a templated string, or like query history is also just now adding the parameters to the data set for the query history entries in the system table as well. So that'll definitely show up in that regard.
So today, so the question was, is there a way to export a dashboard or graph as to PowerPoint? Are you asking about a specific integration? So today, the easiest thing to do is right click, you can download as a PNG. So that gives you a file you can drop in. But there isn't quite like a live handshake to say like this PowerPoint's always going to update based on this dashboard. Is that what you were looking for? Okay,
It,
got
it,
it.
I'll be honest, that's the topic of what was going to be my next hackathon project. So we do quarterly hackathons, and I wasn't doing PowerPoint. I was going to do it on Google Docs because that's what I really want. I don't want to. So I was telling Eason actually this earlier. I don't want to build like a custom AI/BI templating, layout engine because that's like a lot of work, right? It's much easier to like use tools that you're more comfortable with and just have like a thing that says refresh all my my PNGs, right? So that's what I'm used to doing in Google Docs. So it's certainly possible. Not really on a roadmap, but I was thinking about doing it for a hackathon project. So maybe you'll see it in a bit. Yeah, look, actually, since we're a bit low on time, let's just cover the roadmap first. The only section we skip for reference is going to be the user provisioning stuff. Sorry,
Uh,
I'll go back to it in just a second. I know you're taking a photo.
yeah.
The user provisioning stuff, which they mostly covered in the keynote this morning. So, for example, consumer role was a big part. We couldn't say Databricks 1 on Tuesday because it wasn't released yet, but this is Databricks 1, right? So
Yeah.
that's what they're working on here. But yeah, if you're at the keynote, you kind of have an idea of what that means already.
Yeah, and
So
and just real quick, automatic identity means if you're an Azure customer, you can start linking your ADP, like your identity provider, to Databricks, so that when you share a dashboard, you can just find anybody in that IDP. So like all of your colleagues would be able to be shared to. They get an invite, they accept the invite, they get provisioned into Databricks. No more like calling your admin, hey, can you add this team? Like I need to share with them something.
yeah.
So yeah,
Cool. Yeah, we can skip this
cool.
second roadmap slide. I know you want to take a photo.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to cover this?
Yeah. So this is the current list that we've gathered based on conversations like, hey, what are you looking for next in AI/BI to unlock the next set of use cases? So more custom calculations like window functions, a native TV display mode that actually refreshes itself, drill through and drill down, funnel, new visualizations like funnel. Specifically for the embedding use case, we're hearing that your light theme and dark theme kind of nukes my beautiful like internal portal. So can you please like let us change our own background colors and fonts and font colors and things like that? So we're taking steps to give you that, starting with colors, and then we're going to get to fonts. And then just smaller things like, hey, copy and pasting across dashboards, undo, redo, making the canvas grid actually denser so you can have more flexibility in the way you lay things out. Small things like that are also coming as well.
And that's it.
But yeah, that's it.
That's our
Thanks,
whole
guys.
presentation.